And you know what's pretty good? You know what's pretty decent? Like, you know what's okay? Like, some people like it. You know what some people enjoy? Like, some people think it's pretty half okay. Frieren. Frieren is a show that some people like. I am some people, and I want to watch another episode of it. So welcome to an anime reaction watch-along thing. And the way that this works, if you have not been along before, is that up in the upper left corner of the screen, there's a timer. It'll tell you where I am in the episode and what I am looking at. And whenever I pause, you will get a flash screen, a screenshot of whatever it is I'm looking at while I am paused. And whenever I play the episode, you'll see, well, that's the wrong key art. I forgot to swap over from... There, you'll see this instead, which will let you know like what I'm doing and what I'm looking at any given time. And you'll use the timer up here in order to keep in time with what I am doing. And every once in a while, I will say something like 3, 2, 1, pause, and we'll both pause, and then I will talk about some stuff. I'll mention observations, things, react to stuff that's happening. Whenever I have something to say that I can't just say while the thing is happening, right? And then once I'm done with that, I'll say 3, 2, 1, unpause, or 3, 2, 1, go, or whatever. I'll give you a countdown, and then we'll continue playing. And in that way, we will stay in sync with one another. Does that sound about right to you? Is like that reasonably doable system that works more or less for all parties involved? Okay, cool. Then let's go see an elf try to find heaven. Yeah, let's do that. Timer all the way back down to 0. And then 3, 2, 1, go. Interestingly coded Greek a little bit in the visuals. Retaking the journey to... That is not how relationship works, no. I would like to live 1,000 years. A little bit of a clip show here at the start. But yeah, like, sort of the central conceit being Frieren repeating her journey for a chance to say the things to Himmel that she never got to say, right? Which, that's the kind of second chance that... That's the kind of second chance I have dreamed of before. impermanence is like the center of the human condition, right? Like that's sort of at the core of most things. And a show that like uses that as the central underpinning idea for like a journey narrative, for like an adventure narrative, that's just potent storytelling ground to tread, I think. Although I think I have expressed that a few hundred times already. I will express it 100 more. Phantoms of the Dead. Yeah, she turned that one around on him. The attention paid to Frieren's earrings wiggling around. Just little things. Taken by ghosts. Oh yeah, this feels like an episode like where the budget was held back a little bit. Not in the sense that it's bad, but just that there seems to be less extra effort going in. Like, look at the tavern here, how bare it relatively is to some of the other internal environments. Unlike you, I'm a good girl. Aw. Teaching moment. Einsam. Something same. It's another German word. Die einsam. Would that be D or der? Das? Hmm. Wait, you what? You were used to what? Summoning a staff like pulling out a Glock. So that's why we had that scene of Heiter, I'll come to see you. Just for the manipulation and the pain. Yep. Guess who? Well, it knows who is most important. Okay, that's maybe a little much. Ooh, that's a really interesting way to do that. You'll see Heiter when you get to the exactly. Okay, 3, 2, 1, pause. I like because like this is an archetypal story we know, right? This is like a story beat that you see in like in all kinds of stories, like this thing of like, can you really turn your hand against the one you love the most? Like this dilemma of the hero is a good person who has a lot of difficulty hurting people, and so we protect ourselves with a phantom of someone that they care about. And haha, you can't pull the trigger, can you? Same thing of like clone dilemmas, right? Like shoot him, he's the copy. No, he's the copy. Gun swaying back and forth. It's the same kind of narrative dilemma, right? It's this moral test of the hero's ability to discern the people they truly love from people who only pretend to be their loved ones, like who only pretend to care about them. That's sort of the thematic core of it. This was handled quite well, I think, because it emphasized that Fern knows, right? Like she knows completely rationally, she knows that this isn't real. It's not him. It absolutely isn't him. Like there's no dilemma of whether or not she can figure it out, whether or not she's going to get taken in by the illusion. None of that is at stake as a dilemma. What's at stake is whether or not her rationality can overcome her emotions, her emotional hesitation, her desire to spend just a little bit more time in the company, even if it's a fake one, right? Like this emotional need we have for closeness with people. And it focused on that as like we sort of hear her in, like we don't really hear what the ghost is saying so much. Like it says a few things, and then we go to her internal monologue as she's trying to rationalize her way through what's being done, and the way that rationalizing her feelings makes her hesitate, right? And that's just like, oh, that's a good way to do it, because there's no real tension in the scene, right? Like we know, like Frieren is not going to have a problem with this. She's been through this shit before. We know that she's going to be able to do it. there's not any tension, there's not any drama, there's not any real fear. Like, Fern is not in any actual danger, so we get to go through the emotional process with her, right? Of trying to work herself up to that point. And I like that. Like, that's a good little character moment for her. And a good little moment for her to learn. And I do like that. It's like the ghost of Himmel shows up and it's like, hey, kill me, murder me, shoot me. That's genuinely kind of funny. Because it's true. Like if if Himmel was there and he was being used to manipulate Frieren, because it's a reflection, right? Like, the ghost is using the memories of these people's loved ones against them, right? And so for Fern, what she remembers of Heiter is him being a real good granddad to her, right? Like, of saying really nice things to her, complimenting her, like reassuring her, being there for her emotionally. That's what she remembers of him, right? And that's what the ghost is using against her. Whereas if Heiter had appeared to Frieren, he would have been a happy drunk, right? Like, saying something inappropriate or like some kind of cracking some kind of joke or whatever, right? Like, and Himmel appearing to Frieren, like, the illusion has to call itself out. The illusion has to be like, hey, I'm an illusion, you should shoot me. Because Frieren knows, and her memories of Himmel are such that she knows that that's what he would say, right? Which is a really interesting, like, oh, that's an interesting way to engage with the mechanics of the illusion, right? It's not that the illusion knows who these people are. It's not that the illusion knows what their personalities are. It just knows what does the target of the illusion remember about these people. And that's the only thing it can replicate, right, is the memory. And I like showing that off by having the Himmel illusion not be like because you would think the Himmel illusion would be trying to flirt with Frieren, or would be doing something silly, or posing, or like being arrogant, or whatever. But because Frieren remembers Himmel so clearly, she knows exactly what he would say in this situation, right? She doesn't just remember his surface traits; she remembers his personality, like what's inside of his soul, right? And his upstandingness and willingness to self-sacrifice. It tells us something about how Frieren thinks of Himmel. Right? It tells us what is the defining feature of her memory of Himmel, and that's his kind and self-sacrificing nature. None of his silly posturing, none of his flirting, none of all of that, but the fact that he's self-sacrificing. So, like, that's a clever way to characterize these people, because it also tells us that for Fern, Heiter isn't a corrupt priest, right? He isn't a liar, a cheat. He isn't like whatever, like, drunk scoundrel that he was when he was with Frieren. For her, he is the parent figure. He is her beloved father, essentially, grandfather, as it were. Right? Those are the parts of him that she remembers, and so that's the Heiter that appears to her. And I just, as a little subtle bit of world building, as a little subtle insight into how these people remember these other characters. It's just like, that's good. Like, that's how you use an encounter like this to do some interesting storytelling about how the characters are feeling and thinking. Like, very good. 3, 2, 1, unpause. Oh, hello. Sneak attack. Rude awakening. They're also fast. Head pats. Aw. Oh, take on a companion, you say? Boot polishing magic. Ooh. Nasty business. Interesting. Yeah, the animation budget is definitely like. Again, by no means bad, but it's much closer to like seasonal animation now. Frieren. Is it not? So what's his idiosyncrasy gonna be? I see. There we go. There we go. Okay. 3, 2, 1, pause. I do want to call out, like, now we're getting, like, inside Stark's perspective and his memories, like, seeing, like, silly boy. Silly boy. Seeing his perspective here, right? And pay attention to the animation aesthetic here. How it shifts. Like, because Frieren, for the most part, its animation aesthetic is quite grounded, right? Like, it's fairly, I won't say realistic, because that's not really what's going on, but it's grounded, right? Like, characters tend to move fairly deliberately, fairly slowly. There's not a lot of, like, hyper-stylized, fast action sort of going on at a baseline. But then here, because we're in a comedy moment, we get this dragon animated, like, with this super snappy, like, shing, and the house, like, sort of bouncing apart, right? Like, roink, shitting. Like, this much more of, like, a comedy stylized type of animation as the dragon, like, looms over him. Like, this little stylistic shift, because, like, now we're inside of his youthful, silly perspective, sort of clarifying how he feels. It's like, that's a really good shift. That's a really, I like that. I like that as like, it's good storytelling. It's just fun. Oh, that's good. That's funny. 3, 2, 1, go. Echoes of Himmel. Good counterpoint to Fern, because Fern is so serious. Fern is so, like, because of the trauma that she's been through, right? Like, she's a very quickly grown up girl. Stark is a kid. Lovely character design on that guy. That chef. Good counterpoint to Fern. Speaking of which, because he's been the one carving out that canyon, obviously. Oh, you see Himmel in him. Whether you like it or not, you do. I can already tell. No, he's not a good warrior. Oh, that's good characterization. He's someone who can fight for another, not for himself though, because he's a coward. Yeah. Oh, there we go. There's the animation. Okay, cool. So now we're getting our like a second companion finally. Someone who can sort of, because Frieren and Fern are so fucking similar to each other that like they're delightful together. It's nice like Frieren taking on this motherly role, like big sister role for Fern. That's nice, but it did need, it wasn't a balanced party composition. It meant that the first episodes especially, they're very much stuck in sort of the melancholy mode that these characters sort of inhabit by default. I quite like that there's gonna be a silly boy now, right? Like a silly kid who has some growing to do. That's a different kind of growing than what either Fern or Frieren have to do. That's nice. I like Stark. Like immediately, I kind of like Stark because he's trying so hard to be cool. Right, but and this is like a classic comedy scene, right? Like that you have this character who's pretending to be super cool all the time, and it's like, yeah, I'm the cool war, and then like something happens and they reveal that deep inside they're actually insecure or cowardly. Like that's a scene we've seen play out before, right? I liked the way that it was done here. That like it's this thing of like, I see 30 seconds, huh? Do you really have to do that? That it's not. He doesn't immediately break down and go like, do I really have to do that? But it's the moment that Frieren sort of spots that he has no experience fighting monsters, that which is when we sort of jump into anime comedy mode. Because like there is comedy in Frieren, right? Like there's comedy in Frieren and Fern's characters themselves, right? Frieren with her oversleeping, for example. But having like, the party needs a Heiter, right? Like it needs someone. It needs a Himmel. It needs someone who can sort of be the life of the party, as it were, to sort of take over from, like, to carry that part of the party dynamic and just of the character dynamic, right? And I'm really curious to see how he's going to interact with like Frieren's sardonic, overly calm, sort of emotionless demeanor and Fern's extreme seriousness, because Fern has immediately sort of like, because think of what Fern has been through. Think of how much bravery she's had to have as a person just to go through what she's been through and come out on the other side like reasonably functional. And then to see this fucking crybaby sitting there, it's like, I don't know how to fight that dragon. Like instantly she's mad at him, and that's good because that's gonna lead to good party dynamic moments. That's gonna make her force him to grow. And he's probably, hopefully, going to force her to lighten the fuck up a little bit, which is what she needs, right? Like, this is one thing that Fern isn't getting from Frieren at all is, a sense of youth and whimsy, because she's a fucking teenager. Like, she should have a little youth and whimsy in her life. So that's like, again, structurally speaking, Stark seems immediately like a good addition to the party. I also like his character design. Because, like, there's many ways to design a warrior, right? Like, where, the fuck's the dwarf's name? Goddamn fucking ADHD. Shit, awful memory. His master, I don't remember his name right now because of reasons, but like he was sort of a very stereotypical Dragon Quest ass, right, warrior character design, right? Like with the horned helmet and like the long beard and like the big shoulder pauldrons and the cloak and the cape. Like it's all very sort of late 90s high fantasy, in the same way that the whole old party was. And then here we have like a warrior character design with like a very different vibe, like a very modern sort of shoulder bag thing that he's got going on with like a strap and a thing. Like he has a much more, I wouldn't say like urban or like truly modern, but a much more contemporary aesthetic to him, like the way that he's put together. And something that I like, oh yeah, that would probably be more like what a Genshin Impact character would look like, right? Like this is something that's closer to modern high fantasy anime than his master is. Which I like as like a little visual coding for like, okay, this is like a new generation of hero. Like this is someone who's from a like that's split between old school and new school, right? I quite like that as a bit of character design. And also his bright fiery red, like because like Frieren with her like placid Snow White is like classic ice woman, right? Like classic snow type character in the sense that she's like seems cold even though she is very warm on the inside, and she's very like calm. She doesn't really over emote or overact or give any expression of her emotions. And then there's Fern with like her purples and her blues, and like her tendency towards like dark and also very placid nighttime colors. And then here we have like bright, fiery, passionate red, right? Like, which again works very well with his obviously sort of slightly tempestuous character. I like that. Good contrast. Like from the character design perspective, that's a good contrast. That's a good visual coding for like who this character is, what he's like, how he interacts with the rest of the party dynamic. That's quite good. But yeah, like definitely the animation budget here is definitely lower. Right? Like the backgrounds are still pretty fucking immaculate, like these watercolor paintings, again, probably digitally created. But the environment design that I'm seeing, like especially in interiors, like the tavern that they enter here, it's also like, oh, okay, this is relatively bare bones. The building design in the village, like remember me spending 400 million years just freaking out about the design of one building? Then we come here and it's like the buildings are still good, but the level of personality in each individual building here is, you know, not as much. And like there's a fairly flat sort of environment composition going on here, which is, again, previously the level of effort on display had been wild, right? Like way beyond what you would normally consider reasonable for seasonal anime. And the backgrounds here are still, like, I'm so fucking happy they have this traditional aesthetic for the backgrounds, and they've stuck with that. Because digital backgrounds in anime, a lot of the time, like, there's a lot of anime where the background work just lets the story down so badly for me. Because, like, it's an obvious place to cut budget. It's an obvious place to cut. It's an, like, My Hero Academia especially is an anime that I come back to a lot, that I feel severely suffers from its background design. And it's also the same with a lot of contemporary fantasy anime. It's that they tend to have backgrounds that just don't have any real vibe or feeling to them, right? They don't really feel like anything. They don't really feel like specific interesting environments, right? And here, for example, you can see one of the sins that I hate about certain types of background design. Look at that cart. You see how the shadow of the wheels sort of doesn't quite clarify how it's attached to the ground. You see the building here, how it looks like there's a brick floor and then the building is like an object that has just been placed down on top of it rather than be a part of it. Like that's the kind of thing that happens when backgrounds are treated as, okay, we just need to get these out. And for this shot right here, obviously it doesn't matter so much because we stay on these shots for no time at all. We're not going to spend any amount of time in the city. There's no reason to go through and like define a really high quality, like interesting, you know, city design for this town just for these few shots and this like little stopover where we're picking up Stark and we're probably not doing a lot else in the village. No point to doing it. It's a good place to cut for budget, but it is also the kind of thing that when I watch a lot of contemporary fantasy anime, all of the city. Like, look at your any given isekai, like the flood of isekai that come out every season. When you see the city environments, that's what they're like. That like it is like flat surfaces with objects placed upon them, right? Like miniatures that are being put down on a board, rather than like sort of careful consideration of like how are these buildings integrated into their environment, right? Which is like that's because that's the way that an actual village is built, right? Again, this is something I have the benefit of having experience with. I have lived in towns that date back to medieval times, right? And when you go to like the old town parts of those places, like buildings are a part of the landscape, right? They're not modern buildings. Like the way we make buildings in modern times is like, oh yeah, we are plopping down a pre-built structure onto just whatever bit of flat ground we have available. Like that's more the aesthetic of how buildings are made nowadays. But old buildings, like really old buildings that have been there for 200 years, like 400 years, 500 years, they are landscape. They are part of the environment that they're in. Like roads snake their way around them like streams of water, like which can make really old villages a pain in the ass to navigate because like there's no straight roads anywhere. And that's the sort of thing like when I look at a lot of fantasy environments, I see, oh yeah, here's a city with sure has a lot of straight streets, a lot of straight roads, a lot of wide straight roads for some reason. That is not how a medieval tech level village or city or town would be put together. That comes from city planning, right? Which, is not really a thing that existed on such wide scale in medieval times in that way. How the fuck did I get onto this topic? I have no idea. Just to say that I love the hand-painted aesthetic of the backgrounds here, right? Even if I can tell that certain parts of it have like downgraded in quality a bit, that's not to say that any part of it is bad. By the way, I wanted to call out this scene with the dancing golem. Lovely bit of animation on that rock, like all hand animated with the hand, like with the shadows being drawn in by hand to really emphasize the texture of the thing. Is fantastic. And the way that it's animated jumping around and dancing. Yeah, and Himmel being so fucking happy. And breakdancing. I loved the smearing. And the doubling that they used to have the little rock golem dancing around. Like, that's a gorgeous little bit of comedy animation. I love that. And also, it's just a sweet little scene. Like, it's a little, oh, Himmel loved the weird spells that Frieren collects. That's a thing that has entered so deeply into her soul, right? Like, just that it made him happy. And that was kind of enough to spark in her this, that almost as though by carrying on her hobby of collecting these weird spells, she's kind of keeping the memory of him alive a little bit, right? So as a storytelling scene, that was also lovely. Like, I quite liked that. A little bit of insight into Frieren's more lighthearted side that hides underneath those placid eyes, right? Just good. There's still so much fucking good in this show. Like, okay, I'm not gonna have to go completely fucking insane about the animation quite as much anymore, which is nice. But structure, like character storytelling, ooh, still some good shit happening here. Anyway, probably that's probably enough. 45 minutes for a 24-minute episode. Sure, let's cut it there, and I can go watch the next one. Bye.